Hello, everyone.
I'm Carl,
And I'm Em.
and welcome to our podcast discussing all of the latest books. This is season 2, episode 3, and we will be discussing The Silent Patient by Alex, and I'm not going to butcher his last name. It's Michaelides.
It's like mirror
Michaelides.
image.
We're so excited to have you guys back this season to listen to us share our opinions, even if you might not like them. We have some updates on this season and our future plans, so stay tuned until the end to hear more about that. And as always, we'll be saving our ratings until the very end as well.
We promise to give you all of our honest opinions on all the characters, chapters, and scenarios. We don't mean any harm to any of the authors. This is solely our opinion. And as always, we promise to Carl them like we read them.
Period. So, spoilers will lie ahead, obviously, and some trigger warnings for this episode and this book. There are references to cheating, depression, gaslighting, kidnapping, murder, self harm, stalking, suicidal ideation, violence, mental health problems in general, child abuse, death of a parent, drug abuse, hostage situation, and derogatory language about mental health and about women, I believe, is what it's throughout. So, as always, make sure you take care of yourselves because there's a lot in this book. But, like, the subject matter should give you a little bit of a heads up that it's probably going to be a little disturbing.
So if you don't want to hear how this book ends, please pause here, go read the book, and then come back to the episode. So are you ready to get started?
Let's get into it. Okay, so I'm going to read the blurb for this. It is: Alicia Berenson's life is seemingly perfect, until one night when her husband, Gabriel, returns home late from work and Alicia shoots him 5 times in the face and then never speaks another word. That's so aggressive.
It is. When you said it the last one, I was like, okay.
Sorry. Okay. Alicia's refusal to talk or give any kind of an explanation turns a domestic tragedy into a mystery that captures the public imagination. And she, the silent patient, is hidden away from the tabloids at the Grove, a secure psychiatric unit in North London. Criminal psychotherapist Theo Faber is captivated by Alicia's story and jumps at the opportunity to work with her. His determination to get her to talk and unravel the mystery of why she shot her husband will take him down a path more unexpected and more terrifying than he ever imagined.
Alicia is a painter, and Gabriel, her husband, is a fashion photographer. And Gabriel was murdered 6 years ago. So it starts off kind of giving a timeline of the night of events based on kind of like an outside perspective. So Gabriel's photography shoot, ran late, and he drove home approximately about 11 p.m. About a half an hour later, the neighbor Barbie heard gunshots, and the police arrived about 11:35, and they caught Alicia standing in front of the fireplace with a knife at her foot and with her wrist cut and a gun on the floor. Gabriel had wire wrapped around his ankles and his wrist, and he was shot 5 times in the face. So what this kind of book uncovers is a little bit of Alicia's journal you read from, and then you also read Theo's point of view as he's kind of trying to get Alicia to start talking again. Alicia has stayed silent since the night her husband was murdered approximately about 6 years ago. And then other than one painting that she wrote with the word Alcestis?
That's how I would pronounce it, yeah. Alcestis.
Which was a painting, which is what they end up calling it. But she also wrote that word on there and was at her home several days following the murder. And she was standing in front of the easel naked, holding a paintbrush dripping with red paint. It could also be construed as blood, as he details. And the canvas, however, was blank. Her head was turned over her shoulder with her mouth open and her lips parted. So Theo begins describing that the Alcestis is the heroine of Greek mythology, and it is about a play where she willingly sacrifices her life for her husband. And so this painting is on display in a gallery owned by Jean-Felix Martin, who represented Alicia before she got admitted to the hospital. The defense entered a plea of diminished responsibility due to her long history of mental health, and a doctor took the stand and basically stated that her silence is kind of proof of that mental illness. And so she was admitted to a hospital called the Grove. Theo, who is the psychotherapist, becomes kind of obsessed with her and her situation and is trying to basically get to her to speak with her to try to get her to come out of her shell and start talking again. And so he ends up finding a job offer at the Grove as a forensic psychotherapist. And so he decides to apply, and he gets pretty much hired on the spot. He describes that the reason why he wanted to be a psychotherapist was because he wanted to help people, but his internal dialogue starts talking about how his father had an undiagnosed personality disorder for most of his life. It had a lot of hysteria, physical violence, and things like that he often took out on his mom and himself throughout childhood. And he starts talking about how growing up it was a little bit easier for him whenever his dad was out of the house and his dad wasn't there. His mom and him were able to kind of enjoy life a little bit more. And he also talks about how he went and started seeing a therapist as well on campus at the university named Ruth. And so he starts talking through that and processing through why he chose the life that he chose, and kind of goes from there. So when he arrives on his first day for work, he ends up finding out that the group is doing a kind of circle where they're talking about their feelings and things. And he enters the circle and ends up kind of wondering where Alicia is, and ends up seeing her off at kind of in a corner. And she's very catatonic, as he describes her. She's very clearly on multiple medications and different things that's keeping her basically in this catatonic state, which I do think is possibly why she's also not speaking to. I know that's kind of his theory as well. And I mean, with the amount of drugs that they're saying that she's on, that's very highly likely that she just can't physically form a thought in her head to be able to address anybody or anything. And so, I mean, that's in my mind very
I
reasonable.
definitely think it played into it, the prolonged silence.
Yes.
But I also think she just refused to talk in general. I, I, I think the only well, we'll get into that, but I'm certain the medication didn't help. Yeah,
Yes.
because he says like she's like legit like slumped in her chair, like she's
Mm-hmm.
heavily medicated. She can't even sit up straight, like heavily medicated.
Yeah. So Theo addresses his boss and asks for him to start treating Alicia, which I do feel like it was a little bit of a jump in quickly kind of thing, because it seemed like it was his first day and he was already asking to treat her. I feel like he should have probably got to know a little bit about what they do, how they operate.
Well, I was gonna ask. So, did you think that doctor was shady?
There, to be honest, there was something wrong with a little bit of everybody there, which I think Yuri does make that comment whenever they're out smoking, that you kind of have to have a little something wrong with you
Yeah,
to be able to work
that's
here.
true.
So I think each one of them had their own little weird thing going
Okay,
on.
that's fair. I would agree.
But I do think he was very suspicious. But I also think it's similar to Neverlie, where a lot of things seem suspicious, so that way it kind of threw you off of who the actual person was that was the
Yeah,
problem.
that.
So I think there was a little bit of that was happening too. But I kind of, my opinion is, I kind of wish it wasn't Theo. Like, because I think it would have been cool for you to kind of, like, especially at the end, maybe have that thought that it was him, and then turns out the last chapter you find out it was somebody else, or maybe it was Kathy and he was covering it up for her the whole time or something.
Yeah.
It just would have been cool to have that kind of train going. But
Well, and
um
like Neverlie, we sort of had. That's kind of how Neverlie was. We had it where
yeah,
we thought this person did it. Would have made sense that they did it. Looked like the whole book was leading up to they did it, and the last minute
yeah,
we find out. Oh no! Actually, so this one killed that one, but then this one killed that one, and then this one killed that one, and then that's who that
yeah,
actually is, and that's who killed that, and like it was 17 different pieces that we had to put together and Neverlie. This one was more like 2 or 3. But I will
yeah.
say, and before we get started, I'll say, not until closer to the end did I guess the end of this book.
Yes.
So it is definitely done well. So
Me personally, I thought the book was leading up to why she did the
I did
murder.
too.
Per se, not really like
Who murdered or
who did
yeah,
it. I thought we were getting to I think that was the biggest thing that threw me was the fact that I was going into it thinking that he was just trying to get to the bottom of her and her problem. And
I
then it
agree.
even kind of kept hinting on a possible romantic relationship with the two of them. So I kind of thought that maybe they were going to like run away together or something like that. Like there was several different scenarios that kind of were brought up that kind of trailed off into some possibilities,
I
but
wholeheartedly agree. I really thought I really thought that's where we were going.
yeah.
I thought with her being drugged, I didn't think he was drugging her to keep her silent. I thought he was drugging her because he was assaulting her. The Dr.
Hmm.
West or whatever. I don't know
Hmm.
why. I guess because it's very prevalent in psychiatric hospitals for the people to be taken advantage of, just like nursing homes, stuff
Hmm.
like that too. Just a vulnerable population, someone's going to take advantage. I kept waiting for that to happen. I kept waiting for
Yeah.
someone to be like abusing her, whether it be sexually or physically or emotionally or whatever it may be. That's what I kept waiting to happen. So in my mind, that's what I was reading the whole time into it. I was trying to figure out who was doing that. Did Theo come
Hmm.
to do that? Did you know what I mean? Like that's sort of
Yeah.
where I was. And everybody was just so obsessed with her. To me, it didn't make any sense that that's not where it was going.
Yeah.
So I
Agreed.
was totally kind of blindsided by where it actually went. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But it made sense. Like I definitely was like, oh yeah, okay, I can see that.
And all the dots connected.
Yeah, yeah. It's really well written, and I like Emily reads a lot more thrillers than me, but this book is really well written, and I really enjoyed it.
I have not probably read a thriller in some time, but
Well, you've still read more than me. This is,
yeah.
let's see, we read Never Lie, The Twin, I guess if you want to call that a thriller, and Silent Patient. Have we read any other ones?
The Lovely Bones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So almost forgot it. And
It was easy to
I've
forget,
read a
so
couple like true crime, but not like a thriller. This is different. So I can't put it in comparison obviously to other books, but it was pretty good.
I think that overall this was one of the better written thrillers I've read. I know I recently just saw somebody else come out the other day and said that it wasn't as good of one as what they expected whenever it was suggested, and it kind of shocked me because honestly, it's one of the better ones I've read. It was almost very similar to Nightingale, the last book we read, where it was very much like kind of this thought process of who is this other person, kind of thing. And Never Lie too. I mean, it had a lot of like connections that happened. So I liked it. I thought it was one of the better thriller books I've read, and maybe I'm just not reading the right ones. But I mean, to me, it was very well
I don't
written, and it
think.
to me it was not easy to find out who the person was. And I think the biggest thing, which we talked about earlier outside of the podcast, was that I felt that it was almost like two different timelines, that
Yes.
it didn't seem like they corresponded together, and come to find out it was two different timelines, but they were webbing in simultaneously.
Yes.
So it was very difficult to differentiate which the timeline was because it doesn't really say that. You thought you were reading the journal during the time period of when before her husband got murdered, and then you thought you were going into these sessions with the doctor, and then he was going home to his cheating wife and stuff like that. And so it was very hard to differentiates that difference because it never said, okay, this is present day, this is past day, which was part of the ploy. But I think that it was just really good written that way, that you really thought it all interconnected together in the present tense than you did in the past, kind of thing.
I wholeheartedly agree. In my brain, we were reading two separate timelines and they weren't coinciding. They were completely separate. There was no overlap until about, I'd say probably like three-fourths of the book. Then it started to
Hmm.
look so similar that I was like, oh, has it overlapped? Are we I guess you're right. It didn't say that was right then. Like, oh, like then my brain was like, oh, like it was like a light switched on. Like it was really good. He is really well written. So, anyways, yeah, I liked it.
Yeah. So in Theo's first session with Alicia, they just sit in silence, obviously, because she's not wanting to talk.
Correct.
And so he starts reviewing her file and realized that she at one point had become violent with Elise.
Mm,
I feel like a lot of these names were more complicated than they needed to be.
I think Elif is right. I think.
Okay.
Is it Elif? Is that what you have written down?
I believe so,
That's how
yeah.
I pronounced it in my head. Then Elif. I said in my head. Actually, I listened to this, so that's how the audiobook pronounced it.
So she had a violent altercation with Elise, so he kind of begins trying to figure out why. So he also has a meeting with Yuri where they kind of step outside to smoke, and Yuri tells Theo that he believes that he's kind of favoring Alicia a little too much, and that, he's kind of showing a little bit of an obsession. And he also kind of, he does make the comment, like we were talking about earlier, that you have to have a little something wrong with you. And I really find it funny that whenever Yuri talks about how the fact that he stalked a woman and like followed her home and stuff like that, and Theo was like, oh yeah, that's like, I was really like turned off by that, kind of conversation. It was really weird because you did the same thing, sir.
Okay, but listen,
um
did that not make you suspicious of Yuri though? To make you think that Yuri was the one that might have been stalking Alicia?
Wholeheartedly,
Okay,
yes.
I had
Yes.
the same
Yeah.
reaction.
Yeah, which kind of would have made sense too in some aspects, because I mean she had a really like close clingy bond with him a little bit too, so
I think he had a close, clingy bond to her. I think
true.
they were all obsessed with her.
Yes,
I don't understand
but
why.
I think it was the intrigueness of that she won't speak, like why are we, kind of
That seems
the
so
whys.
predatory. I struggle with that.
Yes, that, and I think it was for the fact that they didn't get answers and they wanted answers, and so they were hoping that she would trust them enough to get those answers from her, and they be kind of like the victor, kind of like an ego thing, I guess you can
Yeah,
say.
I can see
Like,
that wholeheartedly. Yep, I can see
I
that.
mean, we're dealing with mainly men, so
Correct.
So he tells Theo to go home and be with his wife Kathy. So he meets up with Kathy. They go out to dinner. They're chit chatting about how they first met and how it was, kind of a haphazard situation. And apparently they both kind of cheated on their significant other to get together.
Not a great
You
start.
know, no. So Theo is given a short time period to get Alicia talking and starts visiting people from her past to hopefully uncover something to help Theo break through to Alicia or give any sense to what happened to get her to start talking. He uncovers Max, Gabriel's brother, secretly in love with Alicia, Alicia's aunt, and her disgust for her, and Jean Felice, love who is loving his cash cow. That was a very big tongue twister. He, however, gets Alicia to start painting to uncover some more mystery. After visiting her old neighbor Barbie, he realizes the biggest part of the mystery is the man that was following her before the murder.
I hate Max and Jean Felix. Felix. Whatever his name
Honestly, I
is.
don't think there was a single outside character that I really like had an attachment
You're
to.
correct because I hated Barbie too.
Yeah, Barbie, Jean Felice, Paul, Lydia, Max. I mean, she it really didn't seem like she had a really good person in her life at all, which is very sad. Like it seemed like they were all using her or playing her in some aspect, and I really felt sorry for
I
her.
will say, I actually. That's why I thought she had such a connection with Gabriel. And I kind of read it both ways. I wondered if he was manipulative and that's why she had struggled with outside relationships, or if they were and he was protecting her. Like, I really couldn't figure
Mhm.
it out whether I liked Gabriel or not. I will say, till until the end, I never once thought that Gabriel was having an affair. That was never
Yeah,
hinted at from her point of view, so we never got that until the end. So for me, I kept like thinking like, well, he seems like he's a good guy. He seems like he's a decent husband. Like that.
it just seemed like he gaslighted her a little bit to me.
There
It
was,
that was the
but I also kept coming back to like, if she is actually that mentally ill, then
Mhm.
maybe
Yeah,
she is wrong. Maybe she is losing her mind, and maybe she, whatever. Once we get to the end, we
yeah,
realize that he wasn't the perfect husband, which no one ever is, but you know what I mean. We realize he's a bad, bad husband, and taking her to get drugged up by Dr. West, his little buddy. Then I was like, oh, that makes sense, yeah.
yeah.
So. But I will say that he was the only character that I thought may have been a support for her in some way. And of course, obviously, by the end, we realized he wasn't. But the
Yeah.
rest of them were awful. She had no real
Yes.
friends.
No.
And her family's all dead, so that doesn't help. Except for
Yeah.
Paul and Aunt
Lydia.
Lydia, who was
Yeah.
psychotic also. It's no wonder she turned out
I
the way
think.
she did.
Well, I kind of wonder if it runs in her family with some kind
Oh,
of mental
absolutely.
illnesses, because they talk about how her mom possibly committed suicide, but then also tried to maybe attempt to murder her,
See,
and then her father supposedly hung himself in the attic.
and that was never answered for me why her mother attempted to murder her.
I'm going to be honest. I then started wondering if we were getting into like a never lie situation where she was actually the problem and it wasn't everybody else around her.
Same. And I started thinking, I don't know if you remember this episode, and I only remember it in grave detail, probably because I just watched it again the other day and I've watched it way too many times. But there's an episode of Criminal Minds where it's a man that's killing women, and in their, attempt to discover him and capture him, they realize that he actually killed his mother when he was 10. Also, it wasn't an accident, car accident. Um, he intentionally murdered her. So I kind of wondered if that's where it was going for Alicia, and we were going to find out that that's not what she's telling us, is not actually what happened, sort of thing. Once we started talking to Paul and Lydia, Aunt Lydia, and stuff, I kind of thought that's where we were going. And
Yeah.
then we didn't. So then I was like, well, that's not really necessary information then, other than showing that she's obviously traumatized and probably suffering from something because of that. But it was crazy to me, like, she seemed more fixated that her dad had said it afterwards than the mom that actually did it. So that was fascinating
Yeah.
too, to like, we explored that more than, I don't know.
I think the reason why they emphasized all of it was kind of linked back to Theo's comment at the end, where he makes a comment, I didn't know she was so mentally unhinged, basically, that she would pick up that gun and shoot him in the head. So,
Okay, okay, that's fair. I feel like,
because that was basically his defense to I didn't murder him, kind of.
which is not an acceptable defense.
Yes.
If you didn't know she was mentally ill, anybody who finds out they're being cheated on can snap like that and do that. So
Hmm.
you shouldn't have given her a gun.
Yep.
Definitely accessory to murder.
Yep.
However, it never talked about, or maybe it did, and that part just didn't stick out to me because I was so shell shocked at that point. But like her, after she shot him, did she cut her own wrist to die?
I don't think it ever actually said.
Okay, I didn't think
Because
so.
I was thinking about that the other day. I don't think it ever actually pinpointed what happened after that
Okay,
fact.
I didn't think so because I was thinking, who cut her wrist? Because in the beginning we made it sound like someone broke in, shot him, and
Hmm.
cut her wrist. That's kind of how it was hinting. Like, did she do it or did someone break in and do it?
And she was just like in a state of shock.
Yes,
Yeah.
like we couldn't really tell. So I kept thinking, then who cut her wrist? That's what I kept coming back to. I don't think it was ever answered. I think you're right.
So we talk about how Gabriel kind of gives her things or like encourages her and kind of supportive,
Yeah.
or so we think. And so he asks her to start making journal entries because he believes it can help her kind of process day-to-day life.
Which was interesting to me, considering he turned out to be the way he was.
I'm going to be honest. I don't think her staying at home and painting was a great move for
I
her
agree.
with her mental health
Yep, I agree
issues.
with that.
I think she would have benefited a lot more. And I think that's why she was so naive with trusting people and different things like that, because she really wasn't out and about to get to know more people than what she was stuck
No, I
with.
would agree with that wholeheartedly. For sure. I think she needed, and she did occasionally like go to like the park and stuff like that, and she'd take
Yeah,
walks or whatever. But I think she needed to do more and have like somebody else to talk
social.
to. Yeah, she definitely
Yeah.
needed an actual therapist too, not
Yes.
Dr. West, who is a
Mhm.
psychiatrist, which obviously do different things.
Yeah. So as she's painting and things, she is in the process of painting a Jesus painting, and she decides to paint his face, Gabriel's, onto the Jesus painting, which I particularly believed, especially at the end where we find out what the play was and kind of what it was about, how the woman basically sacrificed herself for her husband. I felt like that was kind of her painting her depiction of Gabriel, that she was supposed to do everything that he was asking her and kind of worship him and what his goals are and things like that. So I think that was her way of interpreting that, and she did never come out outright and say that, but that was my perspective of that piece of
No,
art.
I wholeheartedly agree. And I think that was my first kind of moment that I was like, I think you might be putting him on a pedestal that he doesn't need to be on. That's a
Yep.
pretty big way to view somebody, to compare somebody, to hold somebody that high of a standard seemed I just kept thinking like, okay, so he's going to fall down from that pedestal. Something's going to
Yeah.
happen that made him fall down from it, and that must be
Yeah.
why she shot him, because that right there was the first time that I was like, she just compare him to Jesus.
Mhm.
No, well, she's mentally ill. That's what I kept thinking too. I was like, I don't know about your Jesus, but my Jesus don't gaslight me.
So Alicia ends up journaling on how her mom had tried to commit suicide with her in the vehicle and possibly tried to kill her in a car accident as well, which I would assume, yes, if she was in the car with her, that was probably her intention.
I would assume so, but also it's really sad to assume that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so Theo, in the same light, is also discovering that his nemesis, Dr. Christian West, is the doctor prescribing meds to Alicia and keeping her in a comatose state. And he states, or Dr. West states that it's due to her trying to end her life often. He says it's basically for her safety. I think he kind of kept her in a comatose state because he didn't want it to be uncovered that he was secretly treating her. I think there was a lot of neglect with that one for sure.
I agree. Let me ask you this though. Do you think it was maybe both reasons? Partially because he wanted her to essentially stay quiet, not be able to identify him, but also partially because she was a danger to herself and others?
Yes.
Yeah, at first, like I said, thought that it was because he was like assaulting her or something, abusing
Hmm.
her. And then once that didn't happen, then I was like, okay, maybe that's not what's going to happen here. Maybe he's doing it to essentially keep her. My thought didn't think that what actually came out that he had treated her before. My thought was almost like, well, if you keep them drugged, like they can't really do anything. They'll be less likely to cause problems. Sort of that mentality of like, well, they'll be quiet if I put, you know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like it's kind of,
Yeah.
which is a medical abuse. It's a form of abuse. So he was doing that, but I definitely never saw it coming that he was treating her outside of here before and is
Hmm.
now the same doctor and didn't tell
Hmm.
anybody. Definitely didn't see that coming.
I kind of wonder
Hmm.
because we do end up uncovering that Dr. West, while he was treating her, said that she had previously had a situation where she had accused an old man of kind of following her, similar to the situation, and that's why they thought she was not telling the truth this time
Yeah.
around. And I kind of wonder if Gabriel was in a similar situation past wise and then just happened to get out before.
Like if he had cheated
Something.
before the first time and that's what she thought was. I My concern is that it was directly related to her father's death. So I don't know. Also, an
I
old
kind of
man, you think he's cheating with the old woman?
no, no, no. She just thought he was the one following her, but I think somebody probably maybe was following her, and she just happened to accuse the old man because he was there every time she kind of turned around.
It's possible. It's certainly possible. I honestly, I could not decide whether or not I trusted that Gabriel was a good husband or whether he was not. The entire time, that was the one question. It wasn't even whether or not she shot him. I don't even care if she shot him. I just could not decide whether or not he was a good husband or a bad husband. And then that
Yeah,
obviously connects to why she may or may not have shot him. You know what I mean?
yeah.
But that question I could not answer. I could not come to a yes or a no the entire book. Even at the end, he's meeting up with Kathy and doing it in the park. What?
Mm-hmm.
First of all. But I don't know. If she was that mentally ill, I don't know. I really struggled with him because, again, at the beginning, like, there were little things that happened that made me think maybe he's not a good guy. But from her point of view, she was so in love with them and so enamored and so happy. I just couldn't wrap my head around it, the differences. But by the end, don't get me wrong, he's a bad guy. He was cheating. He tried to get her drugged so she would stay complicit. He was gaslighting and lying to her left and right about everything under the moon. He didn't believe her about his brother Max. When what's his name was in the house and going to shoot him, he wasn't going to save her life. You know, that actually was probably the
Mm-hmm.
biggest stain on his character for me. Because I was like, you can't
Mm-hmm.
even go out a decent husband.
Mm-hmm.
So there were several things, obviously, by the end that I very much did not like Gabriel and kind of thought, yeah, she got what you deserve. Which, that's not really fair. He didn't murder anybody, you know.
True.
But
Yeah, if he was castrated, he would have got what he deserved.
that's, that would have been a good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That'd have been a good one. He still probably would have found some way to cheat, though, because, they'll
You
find a
see,
way.
that's the part that kind of surprised me is her shooting him 5 times in the face. Usually, whenever a wife that of a person that had a mistress, they usually shoot them or do something to their penis
Yeah.
in turn. So I'm surprised she didn't like shoot him 3 times downstairs.
Yeah. I agree. It was weird. It wasn't, I don't know. But
Is Alex a man or a woman?
huh?
Is Alex a man or a
Oh,
woman?
Alex is a
Oh, it's a
man.
man.
There he is.
Oh, he's kind of
Oh,
cute.
Alex. It's his first book.
Hmm,
He's mentally ill. How much you want to
it's
bet?
possible.
He has an MA in English Literature from Trinity College, Cambridge University, and an MA in Screenwriting from the American Film Institute in Los Angeles. This book spent more than a year on the New York Times bestseller list and sold in a record breaking 50 countries. He lives in London. Is he single?
It's not a great ending statement. You need a British guy,
Yeah,
but you
I
need it.
do. That's why I said, is he single? Would he like.
Alex hit her up. She's an attorney.
I am. Unless you're going to be like Gabriel.
I just realized we also read Perfect Marriage, and that would be that situation where he'd be a writer and you'd be an attorney.
And I'd get away with it too, just like the perfect marriage.
So after the doctors decide to decrease the meds, Theo is attacked by Alicia, and Theo believes that her anger is actually her way of communicating, and that she didn't mean it kind of in a vicious way.
Hmm. She didn't, huh?
So Theo is given 6 weeks to get her talking, and at the same
Crazy.
time, Theo ends up discovering that Kathy has been cheating on him, or I guess what I should say believe is the same time.
Okay, let me ask you this. I don't know why I said that fast. Isn't it crazy? Why am I talking that fast? Isn't it crazy that he saw those emails and he just kept on pretending like nothing happened? Well, is that what you would do? Or would you confront her? Because I would have confronted her. The second she walked in that door, I could have been high as hell and I would have confronted her.
I would have confronted.
How can you go to bed at night next to your wife or your husband knowing they've been doing somebody else?
I think he just I don't know. I think he was just thinking that maybe he was hallucinating almost.
She was hallucinating something, but it wasn't that because she was doing that.
Yeah. I don't know. I really don't have a valid explanation of why he did
Okay. I
ignore
couldn't
it.
have done that. I would have said, I'm going to need you to sit down because this is
Yeah.
what I just found, and I'm going to need you to get out of my house tonight. We'll talk about it tomorrow. I'm just saying.
So at the next meeting with Alicia, he discusses how sometimes he hates his wife, and he kind of asks Alicia kind of a similar question, like, do you hate Gay or did you hate Gabriel or sometimes hate him or something along that lines? And Alicia just kind of gets up and he thinks that she's going to attack him again. And instead she goes to the door and starts banging on the door, kind of requesting to leave the session. And so we end up finding out that Ruth or Theo does go visit Ruth, his old therapist, to discuss his wife's cheating. And she basically advises that due to his progress and everything, he shouldn't stay with her, that he needs to leave, that it's not healthy for him to continue to stay. Which I do think his decision not to leave her is also like a reflection of his own childhood, how his mother refused to leave his father.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was a little hypocritical of him, though, to kind of question his mom's motives of staying and kind of question why she put him through all that and everything just for him to kind of do the same thing. However, I understand that a lot of people are in that same situation where that happens. So,
My only thing about that is that it was a little bit different in that
mhm.
Theo didn't have any children and it was cheating as opposed to abuse.
Yeah.
But I do agree that he was so confident that his mother should have and could have left that it was very surprising to me that he did not leave. That was
Hmm.
very confusing for me. I mean, you know, we say that a lot and we say, well, obviously, if he'd have done that, would have ruined the plot of the story or, you know, whatever. And that's
Yeah.
what would have happened here. But it doesn't sometimes fit with the character. Like everything he said up to this point, it doesn't make sense why he wouldn't have left.
Yeah.
So, and or confronted her. What doesn't seem very psychotherapist of him. You know? I don't know. I just feel
Yeah.
like I would have I feel like I feel like he would have even at least like asked more questions. Maybe not necessarily directly confront her, but indirectly like asking questions, engaging her behavior and her responses to like ascertain what he believed or you know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
I feel
Yeah.
like we missed out on an opportunity there with that.
Which realistically that could have happened, and he just didn't write it because he was trying to portray him
Very good
in a
point.
better light.
Very good point.
So when he gets home, Kathy confronts Theo because she ends up discovering his weed, and he decides to make the choice to stay silent about her cheating. So Theo goes to talk to Elif about what happened with Alicia, where she kind of became violent. And we end up finding out that Elif had asked if Gabriel had deserved being killed. And that's what triggered her to kind of get violent.
I would have stabbed her in her eye with a pen too.
That's not the time that she stabbed her in the eye.
Oh, what'd she do to her?
I don't remember what she did that time. She broke a plate and like tried to stab her with a plate or
Okay,
something.
whatever it was, I would have attacked her too, because who are you talking to? Which, logically, I know Alif is very mentally ill and probably doesn't understand that asking that question is actually inappropriate. But in the moment, if I had just been like pushed to murder my husband like that, and it wasn't even like I didn't have a split second to think about it, and you're going to ask me, what did he do?
Hmm. Honestly, didn't think that Alif had as bad of a mental illness to be in the hospital.
That's fair. I guess we don't fully explore what it is with her or any of the other patients, to be quite frank. We really
Hmm.
focus just on Alicia. So I would have liked some more background maybe on that.
I just kind of felt like, I mean, she had some really bad anger and hostility, but I didn't think it was like inpatient care level behavior. But obviously, there could have been other things that she was not addressed
So
with.
I kind of read her as being almost like mentally delayed. Like
Hmm.
whatever she did have stunted her development in a way that it was almost like childlike innocence, like not understanding that that's an inappropriate question to ask somebody. Like, you know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Yeah.
Like social cues, things like that is kind of how I read
Hmm.
it. That could be me making assumptions. Doesn't mean that's actually what he meant for it to be, but that at least is how I read it and like kind of wrote it off in my brain. If that makes
I kind of wonder if she was sentenced there like Alicia was. Maybe she did something in like a violent act because she displayed a couple times where she was quick to violence. So I kind of wondered if she was in there because she got sentenced there rather than.
it told us why she was in there, didn't it? Hang on.
I don't think so.
All right, so I looked it up to see what a leaf was in there for. And it says, poor leaf, and then it says, what's she in for? Double murder, Christian said. Killed her mother and her sister, suffocated them while they slept. So it is possible, yes, that she might be in there the way that Alicia is.
Gotcha. So Theo goes to visit Max, which is Gabriel's brother, and he admits that he hated Alicia, said she had mood
Mhm.
swings, and he spoke of how Alicia had first tried to kill herself. And as he was kind of leaving, which Theo asked who gets the inheritance, and he kind of clams up and tells him it's best he needs to leave, And Max's secretary stops Theo and tells him that he needs to speak to Paul, which is Alicia's cousin, that he would have more details for him.
Mhm.
So in Alicia's journal, she talks about how the gun in the house is really making her uncomfortable, and that during one of the fights that she had with Gabriel, he kind of became aggressive, and that made her a little scared of him and kind of who he is. And she mentions that that's kind of not the first time that that's occurred. So I don't know if he was like physically abusive or what.
It, like, hinted just enough that you couldn't really tell. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
So Max ends up coming for a visit, and this is in past tense, ends up coming to a visit with Gabriel and Alicia, and Alicia tells him that she's going to tell Gabriel about Max grabbing her or groping her, and he kind of forces her into a kiss. And she ends up not telling Gabriel just because she doesn't believe that he's going to believe her,
Another red
which
flag.
is then yeah, and then it's weird because she's talking about how Gabriel keeps asking her what's bothering her and stuff like that. And so he then ends up making a declaration that he wants a child with Alicia, which apparently he'd not want one in the past. So it kind of took her off guard, which I think was another guilt tactic
Mm.
cover up.
Mhm. Mhm.
So Theo called Max to ask who the doctor was that treated Alicia after her dad had died. And then Max basically threatens him and goes to his boss, and Theo gets in trouble for calling him. And his boss actually bans him from speaking to any other of members of her family.
You
However,
know.
Theo just ignores that. And he goes to visit her cousin Paul. And as he's knocking on the door, he ends up getting hit upside the head and knocked out. And when he wakes up, Theo ends up talking to Paul about how life was growing up, how Alicia kind of stopped visiting when she moved out, and ends up learning that Alicia's dad had hung himself in the attic. And Alicia's aunt, Lydia, which is Paul's mother, kind of freaks out and asks for Theo to come upstairs and speak with her. She starts ranting about a painting that Alicia had done of her and that it was really upsetting, which kind of the way she spoke to and about Alicia, I could kind of see where she would kind of do something along that lines.
Same.
So Theo ends up deciding his next visit is going to be to Jean Felice to see the Gabriel and Jesus painting, the one of Aunt Lydia, and the Alcestis.
Yep.
So he starts asking some questions of Jean Felice, and he basically states that he's seen Alicia before Gabriel was murdered, that everything was okay. She was just kind of stressed, nothing crazy. And Jean Felice ends up telling Theo that if he wants to have Alicia start to talk, that she needs to be given paintbrushes and start painting.
Hello. Duh.
Well, to me, that would be the obvious choice. If she's not speaking with words, that would be the next thing to do.
She's done it once. Why would she not continue to do it?
Well, and I think the Sean Felice though used that as an excuse to maybe get some extra paintings for her for his
Oh, I
gallery.
agree. If not a businessman.
Oh yeah. So we ended up discovering that Paul was in some gambling debt, and that was actually one of the reasons why he went to see Alicia before Gabriel was murdered. And he wanted to borrow some money from Alicia, and I believe it was 20,000. He was in debt for. And Alicia said she didn't have that much money, and Paul kind of accused her of lying about it. And she did end up giving a little bit of money to him, which Gabriel ends up saying that she shouldn't have, that she didn't owe him anything and that she shouldn't have given up any money, which I did feel the way she described he spoke about it was a little on the controlling side of things. It just kind of sounded a little bit like not like, hey, I'm looking out for your best interest. It sounded like, you're giving away our money kind of attitude.
I
But
agree.
that's just,
I kind of thought too, because it's not clear what money she's bringing in. So then I kind of
mm-hmm,
wondered if, like, it was his money really that she's giving
mm-hmm.
away without talking to him. You know what I mean? Kind of thing.
It's possible because they do speak about how it's taken so long for her to paint something new.
And, like
So that's a
and
possibility.
do they have that much money just to give away, or is that,
Mhm.
like, a good chunk of their savings that they can't get back? You know what I'm saying? Like, if
Yeah,
I had more context, I think I would've that's what I needed. I needed more context to be able to read that scene appropriately, I think. Again,
agreed.
I think that was on purpose, though. I think we leave out the context so that we're constantly wondering, is it her that's crazy or is it not? You
Yeah,
know?
I
It was
agree.
done really well because I couldn't put it down because I was so confused. It was so chaotic. There was so much happening and nothing made sense.
Agreed.
So,
So the journal also speaks on how Jean Felice had come to a visit, and he spends the most of the visit talking about himself.
naturally.
And then Alicia ends up telling him, whenever she kind of asks him to leave, that she's actually decided to go. In that conversation, she kind of realizes that Jean Felice and her are not really friends, that it's really just a one sided relationship, which to me, it sounded like somebody else's words. It sounded like somebody else's kind of fed her.
Oh, like Gabriel had put it in her ear already?
Yeah, yeah. Which John Fleece does say, like, this is just Gabriel talking kind of response.
Yeah,
And it did sound like it was that. It sounded like a very gaslit to kind of a recollection on her end
I agree.
context. But that's just my
I
perspective.
agree.
So
A
then,
lot of things, though, that she kind of wrote sounded that way.
yes.
Like the way she wrote about Gabriel sounded that way. Like someone had put that in her ear that he's this great guy and she should be in love with him. And you know what I mean?
So Theo ends up telling Alicia that he has gotten permission for her to paint. And she kind of has her first actual response, which was she did smile. And she ends up painting the hospital on fire, and her and Theo running or escaping together, which that was another confusing part for me, because at this point she had already said that she knew that it was him that he had broke in.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't understand the concept of that painting, to be honest, and I kind of wish it did tell us what the story behind it really meant.
Well, it did kind of hint at it. He said that when he looked at it, you could look at it from two different perspectives. Either he was saving her from the fire or he was about to toss her into it.
Okay.
So I kind of think that's what it was hinting at is like they're like telling her about the affair. Same thing. Is it saving her from the fire or is it tossing her into destruction? You know what I mean? Like I
Yeah.
think that's what it was showing in a way. I do agree though that I kind of wish it would have we would have heard about it from her point of view in her diary when she
Hmm.
wrote that last little entry. Wish it had
Yeah.
talked about it.
So Theo ends up following his wife, Kathy, because she said she's visiting a friend, and he doesn't believe
Of
her,
course she
and he
is.
actually ends up finding out that she actually told the truth that time, which
That
he ends
time.
up saying, yeah, well, he ends up saying that he's disappointed in that, which is kind of odd to say, that if you're hoping your wife is not cheating on you, that you actually are disappointed that she isn't in this moment.
I
Um,
think these people are bored though, and it's like the drama. People live for the drama. It's like grow up. Do something else with your life. Go read a book, watch a TV show.
well, Barbie is number one in that
Oh
drama
my
thing.
gosh, she's bored with her.
Yeah, so she actually comes to the hospital to visit with Alicia, and Theo kind of conversates with her a little bit while she's there, which Theo describes that the whole visitation she's sitting there talking, and Alicia's got no response or anything. Which honestly, I think if I was Alicia, I would have probably thrown a hissy fit to get out of
I would have
that
tried to
rather
stab
than
her.
any of the other parts.
Mhm.
But Theo ends up learning that Alicia had believed that a man had been following her, but her husband had thought that she was just seeing things. So
Wrong.
as she's painting, she ends up stabbing a leaf in the eye with the paintbrush, because she defaces her painting with the word slut on it. And so Alicia is put into seclusion, and Theo's bosses refuse to let him continue therapy, saying that it's kind of backtracking rather than helping her evolve. Almost saying that she's a lost cause.
Yeah, I will say though, I don't know that I would have stabbed her in the eye with a paintbrush, But I would have hit her too, messing with my painting, and I just
Mhm.
worked real hard on that. Get out of here.
Well, I'm wondering how she was allowed in that room.
I bet it was, they ain't watching these people, clearly.
Hmm.
They ain't babysitting well enough.
So Yuri allows Theo to see Alicia and tell her that therapy is ending. So she does go ahead and give Theo her journal to read, which
Kind of bold.
I do find it bold, but also I don't really understand her motives behind that either.
It made me wonder if she thought that would tell him she knew who he was.
Yeah, but I feel like that would be a huge risk.
I mean, but what else can really happen to her? If he wanted to murder her, he'd probably already had done it, you know?
She may think that's the reason why he came to find her.
Maybe. It's possible.
So that's my questions. Like, why did he come to the Grove in the first place, other than his obsession with her? But if he already knew what happened, why does he need to try to get her to talk? And
He,
then not only that,
go ahead.
but if he wanted her to continue not talking, obviously because he puts her in a coma, why would he try to get her to talk in the first place?
So, he only put her in the coma when he realized she did remember him. I think he was banking on the fact that she wouldn't remember him, and like she had been so traumatized by what happened that his face wouldn't have been recognizable essentially. Oh, no, 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 because he had a mask on.
Yeah.
So I think he just assumed she didn't know who he was. And I think her giving the journal was her way of saying like, I do know who you are. He never realized that until later though. But until she like openly lied about what happened.
But she doesn't say it in the journal at first. The last journal entry is the one where Jean Felice had broken into her home.
No, but she writes about the knowing she's being followed and all that sort of stuff.
Oh,
So I think
gotcha.
like that's what she was hinting at. And then when he does find out, that's when he puts her in the coma. But I think he was just cocky, and I think he thought the same reason that I think he got into psychology in the first place is he wanted to save people. And I think he thought like he kind of owed it to her to help her because he put her in that situation. I mean, he tied up Gabriel, gave her the gun, and said, "Do what
See,
you want."
I kind of wondered if he was hoping he got recognition for getting her to talk, and then she just never said anything about that situation, but he knew a lot of context about her situation. But it also confused me why he went and visited all of her family and friends and everything like that, if other than like maybe hoping that she didn't say anything to them about him.
I don't think so. I think he never believed that she knew who he was. And I think he was obsessed with figuring out what made her pull that trigger. I don't think he genuinely believed she was going to shoot him. And
Yeah.
so
Well, he says that
yeah, and so
at the end.
yes, he says that he didn't realize she was that mentally ill. So I don't think he went into that scenario thinking that she actually was going to murder him, and then she did. And I thought he felt responsible for what happened and wanted to understand her mental illness and see if he couldn't help her. Because I think he kind of thought like if he could save her, maybe he also could be saved. Kind of like Bob the entire time.
Okay.
I don't know. I agree though, it's weird. I agree.
Yeah. There was a lot of that did not make sense to me. Like the extras that he put into it, like I feel like it was almost too much effort where it was obvious now knowing who what happened, but now it's obvious reflecting back on it that it was almost like he wanted her to find out who he was, but he really didn't give her a chance to not call him out on it. You know what I mean? Like almost like be like, "Hey, I can help you get out of here," because we were both in bad situations.
Yeah. I agree. It's weird. It's unclear to me what he really thought he was going to accomplish. Because even
Yeah.
if she did speak out, that doesn't set her free. So I don't know. Yeah, it's weird. I will say though, while we're talking about Theo, because this picture is on the back of the book of the author, I picture Theo to be the author.
Yeah, I did in my mind before I actually knew, because I read it on Kindle. I didn't read it on paperback, but I did once you saw me the picture. I was like, I kind of pictured him looking similar to
Yeah.
that. So this journal describes how no one believed her when she thought she was being followed. Secrets begin to unravel, including the fact that Theo's coworker used to treat Alicia under the table. When he tells Alicia about his discovery, she begins speaking and telling him of the night. All the while, Theo begins following his wife to uncover her sneaking off with her lover. Theo ends up breaking into the man's home one day in hopes to show his wife what it feels like to have his love taken from him. The rest unravels from there.
Well,
So the journal speaks of the first time that Alicia had seen the man outside of her home, and Gabriel. It talks how Gabriel believed that it was Jean Felice, and Gabriel kind of also he believes it's Jean Felice, but also doesn't believe that she actually is seeing a person
mhm.
at the same time. So it was kind of a little confusing there.
Agreed.
But she ends up telling Barbie about this man, and she shows a picture that she took, and Barbie kind of believes her and tells her that basically this man's probably scoping out your place to break in or to hurt you or whatever because she's watched tons of TV shows about it.
How stupid. Why would you tell her that?
So Gabriel ends up telling Alicia he believes she needs to go see a doctor because he believes she thinks she's seeing somebody who's not there. And it turns out that Dr. West is the doctor, and she is told she'll have to take pills. And he basically kind of gaslights her into taking it almost, and kind of, I don't know, it was very manipulative. But he tells her basically like, you want to take these because you don't want Gabriel to be in the same situation you put him in before, and you don't want him to have to go through that, do you, just very like
I
manipulative.
agree.
And so she ends up taking the medicine, but she ends up spitting it out as soon as Gabriel walks out of the room. And she ends up deciding to go ahead and move the gun downstairs so that way it's closer if the man ends up breaking in. And she is now starting to believe that the man that is following her is Max, Gabriel's brother.
So for me, because she didn't take her medicine, that kind of made me start leaning back towards maybe she was crazy. Because, like, that's a very common issue, I feel like. So
Yep.
then that made me jump back towards, okay, well, maybe she is crazy. Maybe he's not the crazy one. And you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
made me start doubting again, whether I really knew any of the characters.
Yeah.
This entire thing was very chaotic.
Yes.
I, like, while reading it, I wasn't sure if I was or was not enjoying it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, it was almost like a, wait a minute, what? But then by the end, I was like, oh, yeah, okay.
I think I still have
Big fan.
a lot of questions. So I'm still kind of confused, but at the same time, like a lot of questions got answered in the same
I
context.
agree. I agree. There are still questions. I think some of the answers that we don't get almost could still be inferred based off the answers we do get, some of them. I think there are some questions, for example, who was Yuri stalking? I want to know.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter to the plot, but why mention it if it did matter to the plot, you know?
See, I'm glad you said that because that actually just triggered my thought. So after reading this book, I kind of wondered, based on my theory that possibly Gabriel had gone through the situation prior and been stalked, that Yuri was the first one that stalked her the first time around.
Oh.
And that's why he's obsessed with her now.
Well, I thought he had. The way that they spoke about it, I thought he was the one stalking her.
Well, in the present part, yes, I did think that that was the case too at some point, but now looking back on it, I feel like that would have been a perfect like almost like because her the whole trend with her life is nobody was there for her,
Yeah.
nobody was truly like a good friend, nobody was there to support her, and so that would pretty much play with that baseline that everybody around her is still using her. And like if he was stalking her before, and it could have just been maybe he was an obsessed fan of hers, of like her art that she had done,
Yeah.
and he was stalking her prior, and then now he's her caretaker in this hospital.
Yeah. See, and I thought, so my brain didn't go to that the first time this happened with after Dad's death. I assumed what we were told, that there really wasn't an old man stalking her, was just true. I just took it at its
Mm-hmm.
word. My brain never thought could like Yuri have been that guy or none of that. My brain thought Yuri was this guy until we got to the end, and then I was like, so who was Yuri stalking, and is she still alive? Did he kill somebody? Like, then I had a million questions, and then I got to thinking like, if it's not her, then why is he so obsessed with her? And
Mm-hmm.
we don't get an explanation for that either.
Well, and that's why my thought process of him being like an obsessed fan or like obsessed with,
Yeah,
maybe Gabriel was cheating with his significant other, etc. Like
possible.
I just felt like that would have added an extra layer of twist that didn't see
It
coming.
sure would have. It definitely would have, because it doesn't. There are several questions just like that that again doesn't add or really take away from the plot. It makes you wonder at the beginning if you think it's him stalking her or in the past or whatever. But other than that, it doesn't. Once you realize that it wasn't, it's sort of like, why include it
Yeah.
and why not wrap it up? What do we not know? You know, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
The only purpose obviously is so that you think it's him. But I
Mm-hmm.
would have liked, there were little things like that the entire time that I would have liked cleaned up.
Agreed.
But it was still a really good read.
So Max and his receptionist Tanya go to dinner with Alicia and Gabriel, and when Max follows her to the restroom, she confronts him about the thought that he is possibly the one stalking her, and he says it's not, and she actually believes him whenever he says it. When she gets home, Alicia journals about the fact that she hears someone break into her home, and that's where the journal ends, which is super weird. Why would you be journaling about it whenever someone's breaking into your home?
And then
But
never journal again as if they'd killed you.
yeah, yeah. And so Theo ends up uncovering by that information that the Dr. West that he works with, Christian, is also the same Dr. West that was treating her under the table, and he had never recorded it. I assume as a violation of his medical
A
license.
thousand percent.
So Theo ends up telling him he knows what he did, and he tells Christian that he won't tell anybody about it for now. So Christian agrees to tell him that about Alicia, and he says that Alicia was highly paranoid, delusional, had mood swings, and apparently she had previously accused an older man across the street from spying on her. So they end up having to move. And he believes that her suicide attempt was actually a way of trying to get Gabriel's attention and not actually due to any mental
He
illness.
thought very highly of Gabriel, too.
Mm-hmm. So Theo ends up following Kathy again to the park where she meets up with a man and has sex with him in the forest off of the park while Theo watches slash listens, which I don't feel like fit with Gabriel. He seems very materialistic in a lot of ways. So I don't really see that fitting.
To me, it
Yeah.
didn't fit either. I don't know if that was on purpose to like make us think it was somebody else or what was going on there, but that was a weird scene. A man is
Yeah.
doing your wife, and you're just gonna sit there and listen and fume?
Yeah.
I can assure you I
Mm-hmm.
would not. Yeah, I don't know. It was weird. I kept thinking too, like, how do you look at your wife after that? And that's not all you picture.
Mm-hmm.
It was weird though,
Mm-hmm.
because I'll be honest, I kind of thought it was leading us up to be like, he's delusional, that Kathy wasn't actually his wife or something.
Yeah.
That's what I kept waiting for. Like maybe
Yeah.
or like maybe he's in the loony bin with Alicia as a patient, and these people are all in there with him, and he's made up this grand story that never actually happened or whatever. Like kind of like I did with the twin. I kept thinking like it was gonna all turn out to be fake.
Side note to literally everybody that's listening, this is now our third time we've read a book that we had hoped that was the ending. So we would really like you to send us a suggestion
Please
where that
do.
is the ending. because this is now like the third or fourth time we've suggested that
If
that
it's
be the
if
ending. So surely
Yeah,
there's
if
something
there's
out
not,
there.
can one of you authors write it, please? I can't write a book, but I'm happy to
Yes.
pitch in ideas and tell you how to make it curve at the end if that would help. I don't know, but
Allow us to arc read it. We'll tell you whether or not it's a good hit on the ending,
sure
and we'll
will.
go from
Cause it,
there.
why I don't understand why you wouldn't. Especially
Yeah.
like I really thought it'd be really cool for him to be delusional and thinking that Kathy is his wife because of the
Maybe she think of words
something,
or
or
something.
like a neighbor down the hall, like they didn't actually even live together, but he like fantasized about it and he followed her because he kept talking about how they were so different. And she's like this dancer and she
Mhm.
performs. So like he could have like gone to a show and become obsessed with her and like found her at the bar afterwards and
Mhm.
like all these sort of things. Like I kept waiting for the shoe to drop for him to be crazy.
That would have been really interesting though, like for him to like pivot all of their interactions.
I'm telling you, I'm good at this.
Yeah.
I just can't write it. But that's what I kept thinking. I kept thinking something else was going to happen that was going to expose him because it just didn't make sense. The way he was writing it. And if they were so in love and so perfect, and then why did she cheat? And then we never get her point of view, so we don't really understand
Mhm.
it. And then he stays with her. He never calls her out on it. He pretends it never even happened. Like it. What?
And he basically drugs her up at the
Yeah.
end.
So it's like, what? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's just my opinion.
Well, and he also like calls up Jean Felice, Paul, and Max and like tells them, "Hey, I've got Alicia's secret diary. Like, she's wrote about each of you. You guys, need to meet up
What
with
a
me."
moron.
And so the only one that he ends up going to actually see in person and that actually entertains that
Mhm.
is Paul. He does end up still lying to him that he didn't get any money from Alicia, but he does say that Alicia, her dad, had made the comment that she should have died instead of her mom, which broke her
I
in a
bet it
way.
did.
And so that triggered Theo to
Yeah.
understand why she was silent. And so Theo ends up sneaking in to see Alicia, and she does end up speaking for the first time. And so Theo ends up telling his boss, who agrees that he's made a breakthrough, so he allows Theo to continue seeing her. But Alicia just doesn't stop talking after that. She kind of talks about everything she's kind of pent up for the last six
She tells
years.
her story to
Um,
him, but she
yeah, and
lies.
so she does. Yes, she does. He does end up asking about her last entry in her journal as well. And she says that it was John Felice that had broke into her house and that he wanted to talk about the exhibit. And that she ends up going through the motions with the man that broke in. She basically says that he was friendly to her, kind of chit chatted with her a little bit, asked for some water, and kind of kept stalling. And then he basically traps Gabriel whenever he comes in and ties him up, but also has Alicia tied up at the same time. It was a very weird
Yeah, I agree.
situation, but I do believe by the fact that she recognized his voice that maybe there was a little bit more conversation than what, or not Gabriel's, Theo's perspective of the
Yeah.
story actually was, because it does seem like she recognized his voice, and I don't know if he just said a couple lines, if I would have actually like remembered his voice. I mean, obviously it's a very traumatic event and she's had 6 years to
I was
kind of
gonna
stew
say
on
it's
that, but
possible that the trauma made her remember something that she wouldn't have remembered normally. But even then, it does seem kind of
mhm.
far fetched if he just said like one or two words. I don't know. Also, like his eyes or something, she says.
Yeah, she notices the same look in his eyes
It's
or
weird.
well, and Theo's boss is then whenever he starts getting suspicious, whenever they start talking about the other man from her journal, and Theo's boss describes that he doesn't believe there ever was another man, that he just thinks that that was her coping mechanism. It was very weird, because I don't quite know how everybody knew about
I
this
was just
other
about to
man
say that.
theory.
How did that doctor know? I guess the police. Yeah,
Other
well,
than
say Barbie
Barbie.
told the police, so I guess the police might have told him that this is what she's claiming. But how would he know enough details to say whether or not she was telling the truth if she's never spoken to him?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
How's he going to say one way or another?
Yeah, that was the confusing part to me with that aspect. It was that she's never spoken for him to really get an idea whether or not she was delusional or whether or not she actually was telling the truth. And then Barbie's perspective, when she even told the story to Theo, it wasn't very it wasn't very clear or thorough in how she was describing it. It was basically just like, oh yeah, she said that she had one, or she had a guy, she showed me a picture, and then her husband said just to let it go because it wasn't real. And that was pretty much the
Yeah.
description she gave. So I don't really understand
Yeah,
how they
I
came to that
agree.
conclusion, other than the fact that they just scoffed it off as, oh, she was mentally insane earlier, so now she is too. But that was also not notated in her file because Dr. West, so that doesn't make sense either.
About her being mentally ill prior.
That her having the man thinking the man stalked her before.
Maybe it wasn't.
She discussed that with Dr. West.
Oh, the first
So that
man.
theory,
Yes, 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 yes. Yes, yeah.
yeah, the old man. Yeah, so then it wouldn't even be a matter of she had that
Mm-mm.
happen previously. So that theory wouldn't stand either. So I don't know why he chalked it up to
I don't
that.
either.
Other than the fact that he just didn't want to do his
I think
job.
it was I think it was partially his arrogance and his ability, to be honest. Like he just assumed he
Possibly.
knew based on the lack of details that were given to Barbie, maybe that were given to the police. I don't know. But it felt it felt arrogant. It felt like we are jumping to conclusions. Even him testifying in her trial, you've never even talked to her. You can't
Mm-hmm.
possibly speak to her mental
Yeah.
illness. I will say that the silence,
Yeah.
choosing to remain silent, is definitely a big deal when discussing a mental health issue, but just that alone is not enough. So it didn't make sense to me
No.
either. It didn't make sense. But what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
He
Huh.
he was definitely
I don't know.
far more confident about things than he should have been. I do agree with that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then Theo ends up following Kathy again and finds her making out in the park with some guy. And so she ends up following the guy home and discovers that he has a wife. And so when Theo
Right
gets
here
to work,
is when I knew it was Alicia and Gabriel.
mine was the next time it started
When
describing whenever
he
he was outside their
followed
house.
him home and that man had a wife, and he talks about then the man left again and he watched the wife. I don't know if that was this one or the second one. Whenever that was it. Okay, so
I think
that's
that
the
was
one
the
when I.
second one.
So, and he just kept watching the wife. Then my brain was like, that's Alicia Berenson. And it's Gabriel that Kathy's sleeping with.
So Theo gets to work and discovers that Alicia has overdosed. He also discovers that his boss is
Which was
missing.
shady.
And and so Theo ends up going in to see Alicia and discovers that she has a pinprick on the inside of her arm. And he uncovers that it was
I still,
attempted
at this
murder.
point, did not know it was Theo.
So then Theo ends up finding out the hospital is then placing blame on Yuri for leaving the medicine cabinet open, which apparently turns out he was dealing. But he, I guess, left the medical cabinet open. So Theo ends up telling that it was because Christian, I guess they said Christian caught Yuri with the medicine cabinet open or something along that lines. So Theo ends up saying that no, he's lying, that this is actually what's going on. And so his boss decides to call the police regarding that. However, whenever Theo is leaving, he does catch Yuri giving Elise some drugs. However, the confusing part to me was the fact that he says that Jean Felice during this entire situation has been waiting in the
Yeah.
waiting room. And then he walks out to the waiting room and nobody's there.
It was weird. And so where did he go? I agree.
Super confusing to me. And I don't really quite know the timeline, but then he walks outside to smoke and he ends up running into Max. So I don't know if they confused Max and John Felice, but for the fact that John Felice has never been there.
I don't think you'd confuse those two either. It
Yeah.
was weird. I don't know how to explain it. This entire book was, again, and I'm
It,
going to say it because I've already said it multiple times, but it was just so chaotic.
it was very, very confusing. I'm still to this day not sure why Jean Felice was even mentioned at that point. And even if it was end up being Max, I don't understand why that
Yeah,
was part of
I
it.
agree.
But Theo ends up deciding to break into his wife's lover's home at that point. And you don't understand until the last basically sentence of that chapter that he is actually face to face with Alicia, which when they started describing based off of Alicia's descriptions of what happened and how she ended up discovering the person that day that
Yeah.
ended up breaking in, the description of that plus the description of Gabriel in that moment is whenever it clicked for me. It was like, oh, that's him. It's going to be Alicia. Because especially when they started describing like how she had hooked up a fan, her face was turned away, and then she turned and like found him and stuff like that. I was like, oh, okay. Click, 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 click. All
Yes.
of
Now
it
I will
started
say,
clicking.
again, the second time he watched her, he left, wife stayed. I was like, oh, I'm pretty sure that's Alicia. The moment he talks about opening the garden gate, I was like, it is Alicia. It's Alicia. That's
Mhm.
Theo. Oh my
Yep.
gosh. Like I had like a conniption. I was like, I never saw that coming. Never once thought Theo was the
Yeah.
one stalking her because Gabriel was the one sleeping with Kathy. That never once crossed my mind.
Yeah.
Never.
100%. And then Alicia writes in her book or her journal that she knew that Theo was the man that broke in and that she uncovered that Theo had shot the ceiling after he had basically given Gabriel an ultimatum, either sacrifice yourself or sacrifice her, and he ended up choosing to
Isn't
sacrifice
that
her.
crazy?
So yeah, at that point I think Gabriel or that Theo was kind of like, okay, well, I've done my damage to this relationship as you've done to mine.
Yeah.
Here's the gun. And so Alicia silently gets up, grabs the gun, goes to face Gabriel, and he's like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy you're
Boom, boom, boom,
alive,
boom,
and she
boom.
just pops him 5 times.
Unloads it in his
So
face. So she's
yeah.
definitely crazy. That's not
And so
normal for people to do that to the person that's the love of their life. So,
well, and Theo makes the comment he never expected Alicia to kill Gabriel, and that he was the one that injected her with stuff to get her into the coma. And he proceeds to then help pack up her room to try to search for her journal so that way it never comes out, which he does not end up
nope, he
uncovering.
does not.
So the boss ends up coming down and ends up saying that they're shutting down the hospital because of everything that's happened, which it was kind of already in kind of that space where that was more likely going to happen anyways. But he's opening up another hospital that he would like Theo to run. And so, yeah, a couple years later, Kathy and Theo have moved into his parents' old house after his father has passed, and his mother ends up moving into a care facility. And Kathy is in a really depressive state and barely speaking, which I kind of sort of wonder if she suspected it may have been him, and that's
I
part of
don't
the
think she
reason.
suspected it was him, but I do think that she was depressed because Gabriel died. But I don't think she ever
Yeah.
suspected that it was Theo.
And then an inspector comes to the door and drops by to talk to him about uncovering the journal. And Theo realizes he's been caught, and he, as it says, tries to catch a snowflake outside the window. And that is basically how it ends. So, what is your final thoughts and
I'm going to preface my rating with this information. I don't usually choose my rating until I'm sitting right here in this moment, in this episode each time, to decide what I'm going to rate the book. My brain doesn't really work that way for reading. It's a like or a dislike, whether or not I'd recommend it or wouldn't recommend it. That's sort of how my brain works. But obviously, for the purpose of the podcast, it helps to have an actual number rating. So you're welcome to disregard this. I'll tell you this, highly recommend reading this book. Really good. Loved it. My actual rating, I think, would give it a 4.8. and I gave Never Lie a 5. And the only reason that I would give this knockoff a point 2 are the unanswered questions that were added and made the book chaotic. So then, therefore, I think they should have been wrapped up in the end. Even if it had been
Okay.
like an epilogue from somebody else's point of view, they wrapped up the entire story, or, something like that, or a newspaper article that wrapped up the story, like something crazy, I don't know.
Mhm.
I just would have liked something to pull it all together because it was so chaotic. The entire time, like, I couldn't tell you whether I liked it or didn't like it because I couldn't keep track of what was going on, to be quite frank.
Do you think listening to that had an effect on that instead of reading it? Because I didn't feel like it was that
It might have
chaotic
been.
reading it.
Listening might have made it more chaotic. I listened to it pretty close in time, though, so it wasn't like there was big gaps. Like, I listened to it, I think, within 3 days, so it was pretty quick.
Was it multiple like speakers, or was it the same person, two
It was
different
actually two
voices?
speakers. It was Theo, and
Okay.
then that speaker in Theo's voice would tell you what somebody else said, I think, if I remember correctly, and then Alicia's
Okay.
diary was read by someone else.
Oh.
I enjoyed it, though. The listening experience was still good. I did enjoy it. And I enjoyed I kind of enjoyed the chaos, but I also at the end I just would have liked it all wrapped up just a little bit better, if that makes sense. That's the only reason I
Yeah.
take a point 2 off, but I do highly recommend it. It's really good. If you saw the ending coming, I'd love to pick your brain on what exactly made you see it coming because I missed it. I totally
Hmm.
missed it.
Absolutely.
What about yours?
Yeah, so my ranking system starts at a 3 and goes up or down from there. And so to me this one I gave also a 4.8. It's in the moment after I read it, it was a 5. But now thinking back on the unanswered questions and kind of what's going on with it, I think I'm going to have to take some points off, but
I
I
agree with
also
that.
think if some of the side characters they brought in, like my suggestion with Yuri, how he was maybe another stalker of hers and stuff like that, I feel like it could have just made it a teeny bit better. So I feel like there was some things that could have changed to make it better. And if that's the case, I really can't rank it 5. Like if I can't think of anything to make it better, it would be a 5. But I do think that that would have added a different layer of like a twist to
I
it.
totally agree.
Um, and I think again, it didn't give us a lot of ending. Like we don't know what happened to Yuri. We don't know how it happened to Dr. West. We don't know what happened with Kathy. We don't really know what happened with Alicia either. And we don't know if by Theo jumping out of that window, he ended up even passing. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that it just kind of ended on a cliffhanger of sorts instead of getting solidified into some answers. So,
I
my
agree.
only complaint. But
I
it was
agree
still really good.
wholeheartedly, and I definitely would recommend you reading it. And again, love to pick your brain if you saw the ending coming from the beginning. Would love to know what made you think
Hmm.
that. Or if maybe you've read a book that was similar, maybe that's
Absolutely.
what did it. I don't know, but I'd love to know that.
Hmm.
All right, so if you liked this episode or any other episode, please subscribe to get access to bloopers, extra content, and more on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Patreon, and YouTube. You can listen to our episodes that come out on the 1st, 3rd, and 5th for free, but any extra content will have to be subscribed to on those platforms.
You can also send us book suggestions, comments, or general inquiries to our email at like we read them at Karl with a K M podcast.com. Again, we said if you have a ending of a book that turns out to be where everything was a lie or
In
everything
somebody's head.
was, yeah, we would love to have that suggestion. So send it to us. And like she said, our release schedule is the first, third, and fifth Friday of each month. And then we will have random bonus episodes such as arcs, games, theories, additional books, and Marvel reviews, and more that will be subscription based. So we hope to bring you some more content on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. You'll also get early access to our next book at the end of each episode and not get the announcement if you're not tuning into our episodes until the following Sunday on our social medias.
Yes, and so on October 18th, we will be reading The Surgeon by Leslie Wolfe. I'm going to read the blurb for that. It is another thriller. It is Trusted surgeon, loving wife, murderer? Before my world came crashing down, I had it all. The successful career I dreamed of, the beautiful red brick home where I could relax in front of the fire, The handsome, devoted husband whose blue eyes and charming smile always made me feel safe. As I call time of death, my voice is steady. My colleagues stand hushed around me, their eyes on me, confused, concerned. I have never lost a patient until today. My hands tremble inside their gloves. I slide down the cold, tiled walls, my heart racing in my chest. I have never hated a patient until today. But what choice did I have once I recognized him? And what will I do to protect myself if someone learns the truth? A Kindle #1 and Amazon charts bestseller, The Surgeon is a totally gripping psychological thriller that will have you racing through the pages, gasping for breath until the final jaw dropping twist. If you love Frida McFadden, Shari Lapina, and the girl on the train, you won't be able to put this down. That's going to set really high standards, so I do hope this lives up to it. It'll be fun
Mhm.
once we read this one to kind of compare our three favorite thrillers and see where they all fall again, too. So, thank you for tuning into this episode and listening to our opinions. We hope that you have enjoyed it. And as always, we promise to Carl them like we read them.
Theme song.